Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Educated Collins Snap channel. How you doing? So today we're going to do another Marvel Snap pop quiz. I had really good response from the first one, and I actually didn't know how much people wanted content like that. So definitely really cool. I definitely took a few learnings though from the first one. I really used that one as a pilot just to see if people were interested. But there are a couple of things people did want an improvement on that I hopefully try to address in this next one. Let me know if it gets better, and let me know if this is more the direction you want to see the quiz go. But we can get started for sure. Don't need a dilly dally. So, all right. So here we go. The base mechanics are the same, right? We're going to showcase a random board state, and then you have to decide whether you'll snap, retreat, or just in. We're then going to discuss my opinions. And the structure, once again, is very effective if you actively participate. Now, we've added a new rule as well. So, something that was very confusing or not very clear, I guess, was whether the opponent, whether we should react based on the opponent snapping or not. Especially in the early turns, you pretty much never retreat if an opponent hasn't snapped, and it was kind of hard to judge the board states if in the early games without the pressure of an opponent snapping. So the new rule essentially is that we add this emote on the screen. If this emote is there, you should assume that the opponent's snapping. So it now adds the clarity where if this emote is on the screen, it's usually going to be near the cube. Then you just assume that the opponent has snapped this turn. So it will showcase that, hey, they snapped this turn. And how will you proceed if that happens? So if this isn't on the screen, then you just assume that they haven't snapped. But if this is on the screen, then you're going to assume that they have snapped this turn. Hopefully, this adds some clarity, also adds some dynamics to how you want to respond to the opponent scenario. Now, we do have a little bit more changes here. So let's kind of go over some of the changes. So, I tried to make the screenshots clear and whatnot. We always have the card list at the right. Usually, if that's not provided, I'll try to get the card list and then exit out or whatever. And then another extra information is the bottom right. We're going to have any extra information that might not be clear. Like for this one, the opponent's turn 5 was skipped, right? And you might not know that intrinsically just looking at the board. So that is some extra information that might help you. And then also we have this priority arrow where you can see who has priority at a glance. A lot of people were wondering a lot of the times who's got the priority. I did that work for you. And then another thing here, you can see the opponent snapping emote there, right? So now you know, okay, the opponent has snapped. How do I want to proceed with this one? And I also added a timer so that it's a lot clearer when I'm gonna start talking, especially since adding music a little bit too much effort here. This is quite a bit of work, so definitely hope the timer helps there. And then I just double check, try to make sure that the energy and the turns were accurate, right? Because that definitely did confuse a lot of people when I messed up in the previous one. So hopefully these changes do help make it more clear, help it make it easier for you to follow along. And without further ado, we can begin. So this first one, I think, is pretty interesting. I definitely was thinking whether you could win or lose. And there are some board scenarios where I'm like, oh, you could win this. But the main issue is that if they error you, you're probably still going to be in trouble, right? There are some scenarios with Devil's Sword or your own arrow where you could easily win this, but the fact that they have priority and they can error you makes it a little bit hard. You're thinking, oh, if they error you mid, you could do blah blah blah, but if they error you left, then it's pretty hard to win because since they skipped turn 5, they're telegraphing She-Hulk. If they go arrow left, She-Hulk right, it's really hard for you to contest the middle and the right lane. And that's the main problem here, where if they play correctly, they can beat you in a lot of cases. Where, you know, even if you have a good play, they usually just have a better play as long as they're playing correctly. So this one ends up being a retreat. Though it does look interesting and it does look winnable, but since they do have that turn 5 telegraphed and you know, oh, they still have priority, it's generally hard to win these type of board states. But it does look kind of winnable. I could definitely see, you know, the fear, but since they did snap this turn, you don't want to take a risk here where if they play correctly you lose. So that's why we end up leaving this game. So this one, I think this one is pretty interesting. There's definitely a lot of plays here to think about. The storm, they stormed you, right? They're probably going to play something on that left lane. Usually what happens is they'll play like a Jessica Jones or Juggernaut, right? And how you really want to fight this scenario, right? I was thinking maybe you go Deathlock Demon left, and then you try to try to play Carnage somewhere, and then you'll go maybe Death or Arrow on the last lane. There's also that Fist Tower there where it kind of makes you want to play Arrow on turn 5 to kind of deny the vault. But that does mean that you have to win the vaults, right? So there's definitely an argument where you go, you know, Carnage middle and then Demon left, but then it means that you're not guaranteed to win the flooded location because you can't really affect that. So that's the one scary scenario here. You're the plays are like kind of not fully fleshed out, but I do think you can go Deathlock Demon left and then try to win the other 2 lanes. And unless he's running something like a Vision, it's going to be really hard for him to contest that. Though Juggernaut would mess you up a little bit, so you do have to be a little bit scared about that, especially with the Fist Tower. If they go Juggernaut into that flow location and then you hit the Fist Tower, now you could easily lose. So this is definitely not like the best scenario. There's definitely ways to lose, but I think you're in an okay spot. That I did go snap, as long as you can win um that flow location, you should have a shot. But the player, right? Since I got to see the end of this battle, the player did end up losing, even though I thought they were in a pretty decent scenario. The opponent had like boost stuff. I was really able to abuse Fist Tower. I was like, damn, okay. But I still think the snap was pretty solid. Definitely a powerful scenario. You have a lot of good plays here. It's just, you know, sometimes being favored doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna win. So still like the snap, still like the scenarios we can play in, but it's still a lesson. And like even if it looks favored, it doesn't mean I'm always gonna win. And the first tower did bring up some difficulty there. All right, for this one's pretty cool because it looks like we're playing Cerebro, and we have a pretty good setup here. The Biofrost coming down. So nice thing here for Cerebro. The things I would look out for right now is my opponent playing a Shuri Thanos list, right? Because Cerebro right now loses pretty badly to Red Skull, which Shuris play a lot of, and the Soul Stone, which Thanos plays a lot of. So if they're not playing those two archetypes, first of all, yay. But second of all, you're not going to get instantly heavily countered just from the opponent's cards. Then you also have to look at location, right? Cerebro as well loses to locations pretty hard because the locations can affect your power, and if that does happen, then you are in trouble that way. But we don't have any locations that do that to us, so that's also a win here. And then our hand is also pretty solid. We've got the Brood on 3, which is one of our very powerful hits, and then we also have the Cerebro and the Blue Marvel. So we have a lot of good hits here as well. So I generally like this scenario for a Cerebro player. A lot of good things are going well. Even though the opponent's snapping, they might be snapping for like the Luke Cage. They might not know that we're not even a hazmat deck. I wouldn't mind a hazmat in this deck, just looking at the deck build, but I can also see like it's not really necessary anyway, so no need to do anything too fancy. And if you don't have the Luke Cage, right, the hazmat becomes a dead draw, which is pretty problematic. So I could definitely see the way that this deck is being built here. So generally, as it sounds from my analysis, I would snap here. Definitely think you're in a pretty solid position. Your hand is good. You're not playing into those direct counters, and the locations don't mess you up. So I like this scenario. I think it's pretty solid for the Cerebro player. So this one is pretty interesting. It's not really clear like what to do, honestly, when I looked at this the first time. There's double Titania on the board, right? So that adds a big element of RNG, and we just have a full hand with a ton of stuff. There's also District X, right? And that is a big deal. I think that's big, maybe the most important thing here, where our opponent played Crystal on 5 in the middle and ends up drawing 3 cards, but they're drawing 3 cards from District X. And that adds a whole element of RNG that you can't really expect, but also the opponent can't really rely on. They do have the Zabu Mystique combo, both I probably should have mentioned that the Mystique was Zabu. I definitely should have mentioned that. So, I still need to work on what information I do give you guys, but yeah, it's pretty obvious that the Mystique is copying the Zabu, but still, think that should be mentioned for clarity. But we do have that scenario, but since it's District X, they're going to be getting random cards. They're not going to be getting that premium deck list that they were hoping or used to. They're just going to get a random assortment of cards, and that could be really bad for them. So that consistency is not there. And then as well as we do have this Wong Nick Fury, and I think us having the Wong is definitely a very scary scenario for the opponent to be in, right? The Wong leaving a Wong on the board that's not counterable always pressures your opponent. And we do have some place. Initially, I was thinking Devil Star left, but I actually think the leader left is quite strong. Leader will proc that Titania. And another thing it does is if the opponent plays mid, unless you're playing like double mid, you will get the copy, and the copy will also bounce the Titania back to you. So you can actually just contest all lanes with the leader play, which I kind of like. So there's a lot of scariness, right? You just played a Nick Fury there, so the opponent's like, ooh, they got a full hand of 6 drops. And then you also have the Wong, and then they just got a bunch of random cards from District X. So if District X wasn't there, I actually would feel pretty scared. But since District X is there, I actually think we're pretty favored. And now we have this problem where you would think, oh, let's snap here, but your board state actually looks fairly scary for them, and they just have a bunch of random cards. So if you did snap here, there's a good chance they leave, and because of that, we actually don't want to snap here. You don't want them to feel scared. You have a Wong, right? Like if you're snapping turn 6 with a Wong on the board, like that's too much. That's too much fear. So I actually think you don't snap here. I think you just stay, right? You just see if they want to stay in. Don't give them that telegraph like, hey, I won, or that fear like, hey, I have a Wong and I'm snapping you turn 6 and I know you just got a bunch of random cards. So I was initially thinking, oh, you snap here, but I do think if you snap, they probably leave, and you don't want to do that. So you just stay here, try to get your 2 cubes. They aren't snapping you back. If they snapped you back, you might actually retreat, right? Because that means they got a really good setup. They do have Zabu Mystique discounts, right? So, and they still have cards in their hand. So they could just have some really insane scenario. So if they were snapping you, they feel confident they could maybe get rid of all of their cards, play all 4 of them, and then you could be in big trouble. But since they didn't snap you, they weren't feeling confident, then I think you can just stay here and see how the match plays out. Now this one is pretty sad, right? We just have one card in the hand. And we did I should have also mentioned that we skipped a couple powers this turn, so definitely still need to work on what information I give you guys, right? Because you can see the She-Hulk is 0 energy, which means we kind of waited last turn, but they played wave on 5, and you can kind of see what happened. We played 0, we played the Typhoid Berry, and then maybe we also played Sunspot or something, but they just killmongered us, and now we don't have a lot of pressure. We really have our Typhoid Mary, and they have priority here. So I think with them snapping as well, it's too hard to stay. Anything we can do, they can do better, essentially, right? Since they waved, they can do death, they can do She-Hulk, they can do Arrow, and they're just beating us on every lane, at least by 1. And even if we try to win Baxter Building, if they play correctly, they should win every time. So it's just a nature of, yeah, we can play She-Hulk, Arrow, but they can also do that. You know what I mean? So you're not really ahead here. There's not a lot there. You always have to assume if they're playing like a reasonable deck that they have the answers. So especially if they're snapping you. So yeah, this is definitely a retreat. This one's pretty cut and dry, I would say. So nothing really you can realistically do here. So this one's interesting, right? This is a Kang scenario. I do have on the top left like what happened when you played the Kang. Looks like they played Arrow left, Quinjet right, and you also moved Bucky Barnes and Nimrod right the first time. So this kind of just showcases you the power of Kang and how it kind of manipulates everything, where now you kind of know what their best play was, right? They were planning on playing the Arrow and then the Quinjet. So the main issue here is that you all, like, kind of similar to that previous being ahead on turn 6, is the opponent knows what you know, that you know what they have, right? So if you try following up snapping here, it's going to be pretty bad. And you do have a pretty easy answer for their arrow, since the destroyer doesn't really care whether it gets arrowed. So you have a really nice play to play into it, and you have the Nimrod and the Bucky Barnes setup. So this is just a really, really nice setup there. You got the Hobgoblin on the New York, so they can't really easily contest that lane. So I think if you did snap here, they would probably leave. So once again, you probably do have to just stay here. You can't really um, force that advantage if you want them to stay. You just so the reason is if you snap, you're kind of telegraphing, okay, I can beat your arrow. However, if you don't snap, then they might stay in because they don't know if you're planning on leaving yourself. So they might be, ooh, maybe my arrow beats them here, and then they might stay in just to see. So you have that unknown factor, right, which might cause them to stay. And if you snap, you kind of say, okay, I beat you a lot of the time. So that's why we're not snapping in these scenarios. We want to just stay and try to get the 2 cubes. And it also kind of showcases you how stupid Kang is, right? You kind of fully neutralize that advantage of your opponent trying to sneak anything in there. And you get to snap before that you play the Kang. So you get to fight for 4 cubes, and they have to assume they have the advantage, and if they don't, then they leave, and then if they do, then you get to see their play, and then you get to take advantage of that knowledge. So it's just kind of Kang being OP in these scenarios, at least for cube management. And yeah, you definitely have a good spot here. You can definitely win it. You can definitely stay here. So this one's pretty cut and dry. Always snap ego. All right, that's pretty much it. Let's move on. So, if we actually do want to talk about it, yeah, this is a pretty bad scenario because since you are mostly a Galactus player, there's not a good chance that ego is going to play your play your Galactus in the empty lane, and you have synergy for that. So yeah, I definitely think if normally you leave here, but ego snap. That's the point here. All right, so here's a pretty interesting one. I I think we're in a great spot, honestly, right? Your opponent's playing Patriot, and they just played their Squirrel Girl locking in their lane. I actually think the main issue here is that the opponent, I would say, messed up. So one of the things about Patriot decks that they're running is that you already flood the board a lot. So when you add in Sinister London, there's like such a good chance that you're going to have too little board space. And into that, you cannot be playing Squirrel Girl like this. Like the Squirrel Girl here, I really do not like from the opponent. It locks their lane. It goes into the academy, and the academy is gonna mess up the London. So there's a good chance you can't play into the turn 6 Sinister London for like an onside play. If they could do something like Blue Marvel onslaught last turn, then I think we might actually be in trouble. But since they played the Squirrel Girl, they're not really gonna have that space to do that type of play. Even the Mystique is a little bit questionable, honestly. But I can kind of see it, right? You just go Mystique left, but I think they could have gotten away with a little bit less play and also not investing in the academy as heavily, right? The academy is going to mess up the London. There's almost a big guarantee that London is going to be completely full for the last turn. So definitely don't like that. Another thing you can rely on is they almost definitely don't have Killmonger. So that would be like my one concern for this board state. If um if we were playing Patriot, oh, they could turn 6 kill Killmonger and really mess up our Sunspot angle. But since they're playing Patriot, if you know the Patriot list, they don't have Killmonger a lot of the time, so you usually don't have to worry about that kind of scenario. So hopefully, this is a pretty nice setup. We have the She-Hulk, we have a lot of good answers here, and I think this is more of the opponent making a misplay where they play the Squirrel Girl when they shouldn't have, and they can't do anything like Blue Marvel Onslaught or any of those fancy big plays. So yeah, easily stab here. Uh, pretty clear cut and dry. Definitely think opponent could have done something different to have a better odds in this match. So this one, I think, if you look at the details, can really tell you how this match is gonna play out. Right? They've carnaged the Yondu and they hid Magic, which is actually one of our key cards for this type of deck list. We like the Magic to do the Infinite She-Hulk play, and they also carnage a Daredevil, so they have Daredevil stacking. They're playing a Destroy list. And there's one thing I do not like from our player here. I do not like that this armor is on the right side. Why is it on the right side? You know they're playing a Destroy deck, right? They can easily have a Killmonger on you, but we did decide to play this armor on the right. And even if you go like Cosmo left, like you're still putting that Sunspot in such a precarious position where it can just get Killmongered very easily. I definitely think you wanted to play the armor left or at least protect the Sunspot regardless. So that's the one thing I really don't like here. But even then, they did hit your Magic. They are doing a Daredevil stacking. You don't really have your She-Hulk, so you can't even do Moon Girl double She-Hulk or anything really amazing here. So definitely think this is a pretty clear retreat, especially if they're snapping you, which it looks like they are. So definitely think this one is pretty bad here. There's not a lot of good hope I see in this game for us to stay. So here we have this pretty good setup for discard. And this is kind of like the opposite of the last scenario, where instead of us losing a premium engine, our opponent lost their wave, right? Which with the Wolverine on the board, you can kind of telegraph that they're either some type of destroy or some type of maybe Galactus scenario. So a lot of like not particularly crazy scenarios for us here, but we have a really nice setup here. We've got the Lockjaw into a ton of low cost cards, so that's a really nice piece. And then there's a lot of like really good disruption there. We have with the Moon Knight that could potentially come out, and we have the Morbius, and the discard scenario does help a discard deck. So definitely think there's a lot of good scenarios for us to stay in. I do decide this is a pretty good snap turn. They're not snapping you as well, right? So maybe they don't have a good hand. Maybe they really need the wave, right? They're not really reacting to that discard scenario. So that's another good piece of information we can glean from them. So definitely like this setup here, and especially the throne room. Apocalypse can easily win that with the hand that we have. So definitely think this is a pretty clear snap here, and I think we're in a great spot. Oh man, so this one is the one I really spent the most amount of time going over, trying to figure out like what do we do here. So we do have a real Mysterio mid. We do have 3 cards in opponent's hand, and they just took our Sera, right? Which feels pretty bad. And then they copied it, right? So, and we've already snapped, right? We're already playing for 4 cubes, so we're kind of already invested. And I was really not sure. I was really just like, can we win this? Can we win? They have 3 cards. If we look at our opponent's board state, it's pretty clear that they're playing some type of Mr. Negative deck. So maybe if they have a Mr. Negative in their hand, maybe they top decked it and didn't want to play it, we could get some real abuse here and maybe get a chance here. We actually can play get 20 power on the left lane, or even what is it? We have 10, we have 9 power, so we can add 10. So we can have 19 power on the middle lane. So I'm just thinking like, what if we stay here? What if we stay here and just go for the win? So I end up I'm not sure about this. I end up going for a retreat, but like my instincts is like maybe we can win still. That's my instincts here. Like, oh, maybe because we were already playing for 4, and even though the opponent does have like a really good setup, and if they have Iron Man, that's like the biggest issue. If they have Iron Man, there's a really good chance they can beat us here. But I'm thinking, what if we go Arrow Sentinel mid, right? We'll have 19 power there. Even if they go Iron Man middle, they'll have to play what? They'll have to play 6 power, or is it? They'll have to play 7 power. Yeah, they'll have to play 7 power as well, and to get the win. And that's like not that easy, I would say, in a Mr. Negative deck to just drop 7 power there. The only scary thing is like maybe the Bass hit Iron Man, and then you're kind of screwed. But you're playing like for 8 cubes, like this. I even though it looks super doomed, I would say this isn't actually the insta loss scenario that you might be assuming because of the rogue Mystique steal. I actually think there's like a chance here. So I might stay in, but I think a lot of people are just going to go for the retreat there. So we do have it there, but I do think like I was like maybe you could stay in here. They only have 3 cards, so the arrow can deny a lot, but they're not going to be playing right anyway, so it's not like you're really going to arrow too much. But I think maybe you could actually get a win here, especially since you've already committed the snap. But I decided to go for like what the normal play that is the retreat, but like I might stay and I might just go and see. I feel like I would stay here actually, but I can see I wouldn't judge you for leaving for sure. And I would have loved to see what the turn 6 of this would have ended up being. The player did retreat here, and I do understand it, but like I would have loved to see what the actual board state is. I don't think this is like a guaranteed win for the opponent, which is usually where these type of clear retreats come from. But this one I think is more arguable there. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this one and really all the other scenarios. So this one again was also pretty situational here. The opponent did play an American Chavez buffed up on the left side, and that kind of adds this big wrinkle of like how do we want to proceed, because it means that we do have to try to contest the vault there, beat it by 7, which means we have to play the Maximus left. I mean Maximus right, and then we have to do something with the 2 power, maybe Bucky Jones left. And then we have to contest the other lanes as well, right? We can't full commit to Nida Velar, because if we do, then they can just play 1 power in the sewer system. So we have to put some power in the sewer system, which is really hard for our deck to do because we have these Bucky Barnes that aren't activated. There's not a good chance we're going to be able to activate them next turn. So we're just in a weird spot. But since like the saving graces, we have Daredevil, and most players are not going to be snapping into a Daredevil here, just because like why would you, right? There's too many like, ooh, what if they just counter me completely here and I instantly lose? So that's kind of the problem there. So but I actually don't think we're in as great of a spot. I think there's a good chance it's going to be very hard to win. But since we have the Daredevil allows us to stay. I wouldn't think we're snapping here. I actually don't think we're favored at all. I think we're behind. But since we do have the Daredevil advantage, we can at least stay, see what the next turn looks like, and then kind of react to our draw. But this isn't not a good scenario, I would say. It is maybe winnable though, but the fact that we only get to play 2 cards next turn, very likely, kind of makes this bad, right? So you pretty much have to go Maximus right, and then Bucky Barnes probably left, and then you do what, right? You go you go Maximus and then Deathlock again left, but then you don't play anything on the sewer system. So if they just play any one power or two power in the sewer system and then fill the Nidavella board, you lose that way, right? So you want to put something in the sewer system, but then if you like, the only thing that works is your 3 cost cards. So it's just a really bad scenario, honestly, to be in. And I'm not like super sold on this one, so definitely went for the stay. But if the opponent snapped, which they probably wouldn't, right? Then you have to think about it a little bit deeper. So this one's pretty interesting in that you do have access to the Killmonger. And the Killmonger could do some damage. It's also a ton of kills, and people like seeing all the Killmonger targets get killed at once. But I actually think we shouldn't get distracted by the Killmonger here. I actually think what we should just focus on is the Arrow She-Hulk play, the tried and true tested method. So the scary part is that Dracula, but I would just say just assume you're losing that left lane, and what you should just focus on is the middle lane here. So a lot of times, right, the the most power people can play turn 6 is 12 power. Hulk, Magneto, that kind of card. There isn't a lot of super easy to access 13 plus powers here. And if you go Arrow, She Hulk, middle, you go to 24, which is 13 power ahead. So a lot of times, um, you will be able to beat anything they play on turn 6 there. So I think that's maybe the angle we go for. Like, there are some losses with Doctor Doom and random stuff, but like, who's really playing Doctor Doom in a Dracula list? I don't think that's super common. So I think we can definitely go. We do have the priority. We can definitely go Arrow, She Hulk, and if they play like 12 power, then you will beat them by 1. So I think that's the angle I would take here. I wouldn't really get distracted by the Killmonger, even though it looks cool and you do mess with the demon lane. I just think that the Dracula lane is too much RNG that it's hard to just assume that we're going to have a chance there. So I would just commit um on the middle lane and hope that we have enough power to win. So even though the opponent snapped, I think we can counter snap. I think there's a lot of good scenarios where we just end up winning, and we do have priority. So I think it's a pretty decent snap here. So this one's interesting because if you play a ton of bots, you actually know this is a bot match, right? Like, no one really plays leader anymore, and only bots are really putting that in their decks a lot of the time. But I wanted to assume this is not a bot match, so you have to kind of give a little bit more respect to them. And they are going to be snapping turn 6 into our scenario. You did White Queen or Doctor Doom, so you both have Doctor Dooms. But I'm wondering, if the opponent is snapping here, what type of deck are they running? Right, they have a Professor X, so they're probably running like some type of Daredevil Professor X shenanigans, and then they just have Wave and Leaders, blah blah blah. But you both know they have Doom. How would you play around that? Right, that's the real scenario. I actually think the opponent, a very common card that is also in Professor X Dex is also Gamora, right? And since the Subterranea, there's a very good chance they have a rock. If they do something like rock into Gamora on the Morag, then you're in trouble because the Doctor Doom won't work. They'll tie the Morag, and if you do something cheeky like rock into Quake Scarlet Witch, well then the Gamora will actually just win that lane out. So I think if they're snapping here, you should respect their scenario, respect their knowledge, and be like, ooh, good chance they have an answer here. Though I think a lot of times, especially if it's a bot, they just brainlessly play the Doom. But if you're assuming it's the opponent, you want to respect them, and they're snapping you turn 6, then you should assume they have a play. They know that you have their Doctor Doom. So they're probably playing around that and whatnot and not going for that angle. They're going for a different angle. So I would say like if they snap you here and they're they're actually playing the game out, then I don't think this is something you want to stay in. There's a pretty clear answer with a rock into a 5-drop on the right lane. That can be really hard to deal with. So if any like good 5, like if they play Dino on the right lane is also going to be pretty bad, or if they play even like a Spider Woman, even though that's not as common, that could also work out pretty hard. So that's where the issues arise. But normally, a bot lane bots don't know what they're really doing too much. But that's my thoughts on this scenario. If we were to put a human in there and they're snapping you here, I think you should be pretty scared. But overall, those are the scenarios we have here. I think these ones are kind of difficult. I actually spent a lot of time just like, what do we do here in a lot of these scenarios? They're definitely more confusing. And a little known fact, I actually recorded this previously and I was not recording, so I had to do this twice. And it was like 1 a.m. and I was really tired or really, really sad about myself that I messed up the recording. But overall, hopefully it ends up being a better recording, more polished because of that. So maybe it's not the worst thing. I did this in the morning now after I slept. So let me know what you think about it. Let me know what you think about the changes, the priority, the snapping mechanic, the extra information. And hope you guys enjoy it. I know the last one was very popular and had a lot of discussion there. So I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and have a wonderful rest of your day.